Studies Section 9. The Metaphysics of George Berkeley. Introduction. The project Berkeley set for himself is clear from the rather descriptive title of one of his major works published in 1710. A treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge, wherein the chief causes and difficulty in the sciences with the grounds of skepticism, atheism, and irreligion are inquired into. In this work, he says that the causes of error in the sciences are the metaphysical axioms of Newton physics. The grounds of skepticism, he says, lies in Locke's epistemology. The errors he saw within these two systems of thought then are the prime target of Berkeley's philosophy. In this study section, you will learn about a variant of the idealist metaphysics of Berkeley. This is meant to build on the position of John Locke as an empiricist. You will also learn about Berkeleyan philosophy on abstraction, idealism, and immaterialism. Learning outcomes for study section 9. When you have studied this section, you should be able to discuss the idealist metaphysics of Berkeley. Explain Berkeley's philosophy on abstraction. Briefly explain Berkeley's philosophy on idealism and immaterialism. Berkeley's metaphysics. Berkeley's metaphysics may be understood as an attempt to develop Locke's theory, that is, to exploit the notion that signification is the operative relation between idea and its external cause, as well as between word and idea. He postulates one kind of signification, the mentalistic kind. In both cases, has human minds designate terms to stand for things or ideas. The author of nature designates ideas of sense, things in nature, to stand for ideas he wishes to communicate to other minds. Thus, the notion of active willing is integrated with the notion of signification in Berkeley's metaphysics. Signification is something a mind does. It wills that a sign stand for a thing or idea. Human minds do this when they stipulate definitions, and the author of nature does this when he communicates to other minds using the language of nature, what you see, hear, and so on. The arbitrary nature of human signification differs from the other signification of the author of nature, as the imperfect, fallible, limited mind differs from the perfect, omnipotent, all-good, infinite mind of God. Berkeley is of the view that there is no such entity as a physical world or matter in the sense of an independently existing object. Instead, what you ordinarily call physical objects are actually collections of ideas in a mind. For instance, a table is the set of perceptions that one has when one touches and looks at it. But this does not mean that things are really different from what they appear to be. For Berkeley, all that you can ever know about objects is merely the ideas you have of them. The appearances you experience are the very object, and the appearances are sensations or perceptions of a thinking being. What is the relationship between Berkeley metaphysics and Locke theory? Berkeley metaphysics is meant to develop Locke theory, mind and God. According to Berkeley, ideas themselves are only passive effects of something, unable to produce or cause any further ideas. You are able to influence or affect only a very small number, if any, of the ideas that you have, whether you will or not. When you open your eyes, you perceive certain ideas. When your finger is pricked, even though you may not enjoy it or wish it, you experience a painful sensation, and so on. Berkeley then posits that the order of ideas must be due to some mind other than yours, a mind that constantly perceives all the ideas and at various times makes you perceive the particular group of ideas that constitute our experience. For Berkeley, God is that universal mind that always perceives. Meanwhile, the mind is active and is an agent, while ideas are only the passive effect of mental activity. The entire magnificent world of nature, with its wonderful scientific harmony, is nothing but an expression of the ideas in the divine mind. The natural world was presented to you as a kind of sign language for interpreting God's mind. He was well aware that many scientists, including Newton, were people of great faith who saw the new science as pointing to the majesty of God. However, Berkeley saw sinister implications lurking in the science celebrated in his days. Differentiate between the mind and ideas. While the mind is an active agent, ideas are the passive effect of mental activity. Abstraction. In the introduction to the principles of human knowledge, Berkeley laments the doubt and uncertainty found in philosophical discussions, and he attempts to find those principles that drew philosophy away from common sense and intuition. He finds the source of skepticism in the theory of abstract ideas, which he criticizes. Berkeley begins by giving a general overview of the doctrine. It is agreed on all hands that the qualities or modes of things do never really exist, each of them apart by itself and separated from all others, but are mixed, as it were, and blended together, several in the same object. But as you are told, the mind being able to consider each quality singly or abstracted from those other qualities with which it is united, does by that means frame to itself abstract ideas. Note that it is possible for color or motion to exist without extension, but only that the mind can frame to itself by abstraction the idea of color exclusive of extension and of motion exclusive of both color and extension. Although theories of abstraction date back at least to Aristotle, Metaphysics, Book K, Chapter 3, 1061a29 to 1069b4, were prevalent among the medievals and are found in the Cartesian Descartes 1, 212 to 213, Arnold and Nicole. There seem to be two reasons why Berkeley focused on Locke's account, as you find in his book, Essay Concerning Human Understanding. First, Locke's work was recent and familiar to Berkeley at the time, and second, Berkeley seems to have considered Locke's account the best available. According to Locke, the doctrine of abstract ideas explains how knowledge can be communicated and how it can be increased. It explains how general terms obtain meaning. A general term, such as cat, refers to an abstract general idea, which contains all and only those properties that one deems common to all cats, or more properly, the ways in which all cats resemble each other. The connection between a general term and an abstract idea is arbitrary and conventional, and the relation between an abstract idea and the individual object falling under it is a natural relation, resemblance. If Locke's theory is sound, it provides a means by which one can account for the meaning of general terms without invoking general objects, universals. Having outlined Locke's account of abstraction in introduction, which allegedly results in the idea of a human which is colored but has no determinate color, that the idea includes a general idea of color but not a specific color such as black or white or brown or yellow, which has a size but has no determinate size, and so forth. Berkeley argues in that he can form no such idea. On the face of it, his argument is weak. At most, It shows that insofar as it cannot form the idea, and assuming that all humans have similar psychological abilities, there is some evidence that no humans can form abstract ideas of the sort Locke described. But there is a remark made in passing that suggests that there is a much stronger argument implicit in Berkeley's position. Berkeley writes, "To be plain, I own myself able to abstract in one sense, as when I consider some particular part or qualities separated from others, with which though they are united in some object, yet it is possible they may really exist without them. But I deny that I can abstract one from another, or conceive separately those qualities which it is impossible should exist so separated, or that I can frame a general notion by abstracting from particulars in the manner aforesaid. Which two last are the proper acceptations of abstraction. This threefold distinction among types of abstraction is found in Arnold and Nichols' logic, or the art of thinking. The first type of abstraction concerns integral parts. The head, arms, torso, and legs are integral parts of a body. Each can exist in separation from the body of which it is a part. The second kind of abstraction arises when you consider a mode without paying attention to its substance, or two modes which are joined together in the same substance, taking each one separately. The third concerns distinctions of reason, for example, conceiving of a triangle as equilateral without conceiving of it as equiangular. Berkeley grants that he can abstract in the first sense. I can consider the hand, the eye. I can consider the hand, the eye, the nose, each by itself abstracted or separated from the rest of the body. But he denies that he can abstract in the later two senses. The later two cases represent impossible states of affairs. Berkeley further noted that the abstractionist held that it is impossible for a mode to exist apart from a substance. Many abstractionists also accepted a conceivability criterion of possibility. If one can clearly and distinctly conceive of a state of affairs, then it is possible for that state of affairs to exist as conceived. The principle entails that impossible states of affairs are inconceivable. So, granting it is impossible for a mode to exist apart from a substance, it follows that it is impossible to conceive of a mode apart from a substance, that the second form of abstraction is impossible. And if the second falls, the third falls as well, since the third requires that alternative descriptions of an object pick out no differences in reality. So, a traditional theory of modes and substances, the conceivability criterion of possibility and abstraction are an inconsistent triad. The inconsistency can be resolved by dropping the doctrine of abstract ideas. Berkeley made this point explicitly, thus, it is, I think, a received axiom that impossibility cannot be conceived. For what created intelligence will pretend to conceive that which God cannot cause to be? Now, it is on all hands agreed that nothing abstract or general can be made really to exist, whence it should seem to follow that it cannot have so much as an ideal existence in the understanding. One of the marks of the modern period is an adherence to the principle of parsimony, Occam's razor. The principle holds that the theoretically simpler of two explanations is more probably true. In the 17th and 18th centuries, this was sometimes expressed as God does nothing in vain. So, if it is possible to construct a theory of meaning that does not introduce abstract ideas as a distinct kind of idea, that theory would be simpler and deemed more probably true. This is the strategy Berkeley adopts. Granting Locke that all existents are particulars, Berkeley remarks, but it seems that a word becomes general by being made the sign not of an abstract general idea, but of several particular ideas, any one of which is indifferently suggested to the mind. Ideas remain particular, although a particular idea can function as a general idea. For example, when a geometer draws a line on a blackboard, it is taken to represent all lines, even though the line itself is particular and has determinate qualities. Similarly, a particular idea can represent all similar ideas. So, whether one takes Berkeley to mean that words apply immediately to objects or that meaning is mediated by paradigmatic ideas, the theory is simpler than the abstractionist insofar as all ideas are particular and determinate. Berkeley concludes his discussion of abstraction by noting that all general words are used to denote objects or kinds of objects. His discussion of the non-denotative uses of language is often taken to anticipate Ludwig Wittgenstein's interest in meaning as use. What is the connection between a general term and an abstract idea? The connection between a general term and an abstract idea is arbitrary and conventional. Idealism and immaterialism. The philosophy of Berkeley can in some sort be summed up by his now famous principle, which is to be perceived. To this end, Berkeley as an idealist held that ordinary objects are only collections of ideas which are mind-dependent, and as an immaterialist, he held that there are no material substances. There are only finite mental substances and an infinite mental substance, namely God. On this point, there is general agreement. There is, however, less agreement on Berkeley's argumentative approach to idealism and immaterialism and on the role of some of his specific arguments. His central arguments are often deemed weak. Contrary to some commentators, Berkeley's metaphysics can be said to rest on epistemological foundations. Berkeley begins his discussion by pointing out that it is evident to anyone who takes a survey of the object of human knowledge that they are either ideas actually imprinted on the senses or else such as are perceived by attending to the passions and operations of the mind, or lastly ideas formed by help of memory and imagination, either compounding, dividing, or barely representing those originally perceived in the aforesaid ways. This seems to say that ideas are the intermediate object of knowledge in a fundamental sense, acquaintance. Following Locke, there are ideas of sense, reflection, and imagination. So, ordinary objects as known are collections of ideas marked by a single name. Berkeley's example is an apple. If ideas are construed as objects of knowledge, then there must also be something that knows or perceives them and exercises diverse operations as willing, imagining, and remembering about them. This Berkeley calls the mind or spirit. Minds as knowers are distinct from ideas as things known. For an idea, to be is to be perceived known. Since this holds for ideas in general, it holds for sensations or ideas imprinted on the sense in particular. Berkeley contends that the opinion strangely prevailing amongst men that houses, mountains, rivers, and in a word, all sensible objects have an existence natural or real, distinct from being perceived, is inconsistent, a manifest contradiction. If one construes sensible objects as ideas of sense and ideas are objects of knowledge, then having a real existence distinct from being perceived would require that an object be known as an idea and unknown as a thing distinct from being perceived, which is inconsistent. He explains the source of the error on the basis of the doctrine of abstract ideas. For Berkeley, ordinary objects as known are nothing but collections of ideas. If, like Descartes, Berkeley holds that claims of existence are justified if and only if the existence can be known, then ordinary objects must be at least collections of ideas. As Berkeley put it, all the choir of heaven and furniture of the earth, in a word, all those bodies which compose the mighty frame of the world, have not any subsistence without a mind, that their being is to be perceived or known. The only substance that can be known is a spirit or thinking substance. One of the marks of the modern period is the doctrine of primary and secondary qualities, although it was anticipated by Descartes, Malebranche, and others. The terms themselves were introduced in Robert Boyle's Of the Origins of Forms and Qualities, 1666, and Locke's essay Primary Qualities are the properties of objects as such. The primary qualities are solidity, extension, figure, number, and mobility. Secondary qualities are either those arrangement of corpuscles containing only primary qualities that cause one to have ideas of color, sound, taste, heat, cold, and smell, or on some account, the ideas themselves. If the distinction can be maintained, there would be grounds for claiming that ordinary objects are something more than ideas. It is this theory of matter Berkeley considers first. After giving a sketch of Locke's account of the primary/secondary quality distinction, Berkeley's initial salvo focuses on his previous conclusions and the likeness principle. By matter, therefore, you are to understand an inert, senseless substance in which extension, figure, and motion do actually subsist. Such a view is inconsistent with his earlier conclusions that extension, figure, and motion are ideas. The likeness principle blocks any attempts to go beyond ideas on the basis of resemblance. Combining the previous conclusions with the standard account of primary qualities requires that primary qualities both exist apart from the mind and only in the mind. So, Berkeley concludes that what is called matter or corporeal substance involves a contradiction in it. He then turns to the individual qualities. If there is a distinction between primary and secondary qualities, there must be a ground for the distinction. Indeed, given the common contention that an efficient cause must be numerically distinct from its effect, if one cannot show that primary and secondary qualities are distinct, there are grounds for questioning the causal hypothesis. Berkeley argues that there is no ground for the distinction. Appealing to what one knows, ideas as they are conceived, Berkeley argues that one cannot conceive of a primary quality such as extension without some secondary quality as well. One cannot frame an idea of a body extended and moved, but I must withal give it some color or other sensible quality which is acknowledged to exist only in the mind. If such sensible qualities as color exist only in the mind, and extension and motion cannot be known without some sensible quality, there is no ground for claiming extension exists apart from the mind. The primary/secondary quality distinction collapses. The source of the philosophical error is cited as the doctrine of abstract ideas. After disposing of the primary/secondary quality distinction, Berkeley turns to an older theory of material substance, a substratum theory. At least since Aristotle, philosophers had heard that qualities of material objects depend on and exist in a substance which has those qualities. This supposed substance allegedly remains the same through change. But if one claims that there are material substances, one must have reasons to support that claim. In Principles of Human Understanding, Berkeley develops a series of arguments to the effect that 1. One cannot form an idea of a substratum. 2. The theory of material substance plays no explanatory role. And 3. It is impossible to produce evidence for the mere possibility of such an entity. Berkeley argues that one cannot make good on the notion of support. Evident support cannot here be taken in its usual or literal sense, as when you say that pillars support a building, so one does not even have a relative idea of material substratum. Without a clear notion of the alleged relation, one cannot single out a material substance on the basis of a relation to something perceived. Berkeley seems to argue that in any case one might consider books in the back of a closet, plants deep in a wood with no one about, footprints on the far side of the moon, objects of thought as being related to the mind conceiving of them. So, it is contradictory to claim that those objects have no relation to a mind. However, Berkeley claims that an inspection of our ideas shows that they are causally inert. Since there is a continuous succession of ideas in our minds, there must be some cause of it. Since this cause can be neither an idea nor a material substance, it must be a spiritual substance. This sets the stage for Berkeley's argument for the existence of God and the distinction between real things and imaginary things. One knows that one causes some of one's own ideas. Since the mind is passive in perception, there are ideas which one's own mind does not cause. Only a mind or spirit can be a cause. There is therefore some other will or spirit that produces them. As such, this is not an argument for the existence of God, although Berkeley's further discussion assumes that at least one mind is the divine mind. Was Berkeley only an idealist? No, he was also an immaterialist. Summary of Studies Section 9. In Studies Section 9, you have learned that 1. The central issues in the metaphysics of George Berkeley are that it identifies the metaphysical theory of idealism and immaterialism as the description of Berkeley's position. The essence of this position is that reality is made up of ideas, and since ideas are of the mind, the most fundamentals of reality are the mind plus the ideas. This is the end of Studies Section 9. Thanks for listening.